Then he talks too about how belief works in wondrous ways. The belief systems of the church, this is pretty well documented. You know, I grew up in the church, and there was always people, almost every Sunday somebody was getting up and saying about, you know, how wonderful God was to them that week. And that's all about the belief system. Then, of course, he gets into the schizophrenia. That's a big chapter, and talks about how it's kind of like a relapse into the bicameral mind. It's not totally like the bicameral mind, because there are differences, but there are also quite a few parallels. Before 400 BC, what is now called schizophrenia was a special relationship to the divine. Of course, now it's not quite the same thing, simply because of the collective cognitive imperative of our belief system doesn't allow it. Switching between hemispheres is slower in schizophrenics. These are clinical tests that have been done on schizophrenics, where normal people, the switching back and forth between hemispheres takes place once every minute or so. In schizophrenics, it only happens like once every 4 or 5 minutes. Then he talks too about how inhibition of one side can occur by excitation of an area in the other side, which gets back to the idea of the jealousy idea. How if you have one side of the brain in executive control, it's not going to want to allow the other side to have control. So you've got to have a leader and a follower, even in your brain, which is kind of like you know, a lot of other things in life. Where you have teamwork, somebody has to lead and other people have to follow. And he says, what was in the past an augury for direction of action is now a search for an innocence of certainty among the mythologies of facts. This is getting into the auguries of science, where and this is also something that McLuhan got into a little bit, where he talks about excuse me, it's hard to get comfortable in the woods. And Wyndham is right, nature sucks. McLuhan used to talk a lot about how technology would change our perceptions, actually create different internal environments, internal psychological environments. And this goes all the way back to language, and is still language is still a big part of this. The way it affects our consciousness. Our technology, their feedback mechanisms, he used to say, McLuhan did, how they will, he used to talk a lot about how our technologies create numbness, where, you know, say you're, he used to say things like, you know, driving a car makes you a paralytic, in effect. And, of course, he used a lot of hyperbole, which got him into trouble. But it's amazing how many of his predictions and forecasts have come true. His global village, for example. You see young people today with their nose rings and their tattoos. This is a very tribal society we're moving into, and McLuhan very much predicted that. Another idea that he talks about that I think is real interesting is there's no operation in consciousness that did not occur in behavior first. This is speaking of why language, particularly writing, engenders consciousness. I was watching a video on YouTube here a while back, and I'm running out of battery. I might have to stop now. We'll see how far it goes. Anyway, this YouTube video of a young guy who had just read about a clinical trial of where they measured a person's they somehow measured the signal going to a person's finger, where he'd move his finger, and after the signal went to his finger to move, it was only after the signal went to his finger, something like 0.03 milliseconds or something like that, where consciousness would then occur. Well, this really freaked out this guy. He thought a lot about it. But if you think about, if you really study much about psychology, it's a very well-known phenomenon that consciousness follows behavior, and it's not the other way around. Consciousness doesn't create behavior. Although I would say that it's something like a metaphor that I thought about in terms of this is that consciousness is something like the rudder on a boat, where it follows behind, but yet it guides the boat. And without a rudder, a boat is pretty helpless in the water. And we can see this. Consciousness has been selected for very carefully by nature. Conscious people survive quite a bit better than unconscious bicameral people. Then he talks about the cis words: phronesis, gnosis, genesis, emphasis, analysis. They create new concepts in 6th century BC. Phronesis is consciousness and practical wisdom, intellection, thinking, and understanding. And then he gets into going from one affect to an emotion, like from fear to anxiety. The bicameral mind had fear, but then the conscious mind had anxiety. Well, fear doesn't last very long, but anxiety does. Shame to guilt. Bicameral mind had shame, and the conscious mind had guilt. And of course, you know that in the conscious mind, these emotions can last a long time and create a lot of problems. Where in the bicameral mind, they had the immediate effect, but affect, but it didn't last very long, so it didn't cause as many problems. And right about this time, there was the beginning of the 7th century. So when he puts this as the move from mating to sex, beginning in the 7th century. And this is where the burgeoning of pornographic imagery and so on.